What up, Coordination? Today on the pod, we have Kolektivo, which is a tool, a movement, and a community that is enabling autonomy in local communities that want to regenerate their commons. Basically, they issue geo-NFTs, which are NFTs which collect value via environmental monitoring, underlying the material reality in local communities. So you can think about using a Kolektivo geo-NFT to financialize the health of your coral reefs or the biodiversity of your local economy. And then that creates an incentive for people to come in and to take care of the commons, and that boosts the value of their NFTs. So how can we use Web3 finance in order to create local currencies, local community incentives to fund the public good? And I'm just so here for this world where we're building a pluralistic, modular, civilizational scale infrastructure for supporting the commons and public goods. And what's really cool to me is how tools like Kolektivo stack on top of a bunch of other regen Web3 tools that could give a systemic incentive to the world's regens, degens, and just everyday people to support their commons. And we want to make it cool and profitable to support the commons and to do good. So Luuk is just really articulate and passionate about this use case. We talk a lot about taking Web3 and getting outside of our bubbles and using it in local communities in this episode. And the fact that Kolektivo and Luuk already have a pilot on the ground in Luuk's hometown, I think is really, really cool. So really, really liked this episode, and I think that you're going to too. Without further ado, I'll give you Luuk from Kolektivo. Enjoy.
Working in Web3 is awesome. It's freeing, powerful, and so much fun. But working outside of the typical W-2 employee structure is a deal breaker for so many. OPOLIS is helping the self-sovereign worker focus on what they do best, their work, while managing the back end for them. There is a lot of nation-state overhead when working in Web3, and OPOLIS takes care of all of the back-end stuff, freeing you up to do what you do best. OPOLIS leverages group buying power through a community employment co-op, helping you save 20 to 50% on high-quality, affordable healthcare options through Cigna. So, do what you love and maintain your financial security. With OPOLIS, you must be authorized to work in the United States to receive OPOLIS benefits, but OPOLIS is expanding its services to Canada starting on January 1st, 2023. So, book a 30-minute consultation with the OPOLIS experts and join OPOLIS by December 31st of 2022 and get 1,000 work tokens and 1,000 bank tokens when you sign up. So go to connect.opolis.co/bankless to get started. GOLDFINCH is a decentralized credit protocol with a mission to connect the world's capital to the world's growth. GOLDFINCH focuses on real yields from real companies, so start lending your USDC to real businesses driving growth worldwide. GOLDFINCH's borrowers are proven fintechs and credit funds in emerging markets who need access to GOLDFINCH's capital to drive economic growth in regions faced with barriers to financial access. In just under 2 years, GOLDFINCH has loaned over 100 million USDC, reaching over 1 million people and businesses across 28 countries. GOLDFINCH is doing what DeFi was always meant to do, expanding financial access to those who have historically been shut out of the TradFi system. So, become a GOLDFINCH member to put your USDC to work, empowering real businesses' growth. Join GOLDFINCH's new member vaults to be an active investor and take part in supporting GOLDFINCH's security and expansion. Receive yield enhancements generated by protocol revenue, plus access exclusive communication channels and more. So go to goldfinch.finance to get started.
All right. Hey, Luuk, how's it going?
Doing really well. How are you doing, Kevin?
Pretty good, thanks. Really keen to talk to you about Kolektivo. Tell us about it.
Tell us about it in one sentence. We're enabling autonomy in local populations by building a toolkit that creates a network of regenerative economies.
Beautiful. Tell us more. We don't need to collapse it down to just one sentence. Do you have any pilots live right now?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a pilot right now in Curacao. It's a small Caribbean island. We actually started experimentation there over 4 years ago. It started back in 2018 when we received a grant from DAOstack, which was one of the, let's call it the three big guys back in those days. You had Aragon, DAOstack, and Colony. This was kind of pre-Moloch DAO, pre a lot of the things that people may consider kind of the start of DAO history now. We received a grant to look for the potential of decentralized governance for small island nations specifically. That research showed, to our surprise, of course not, that over 50% of public good funding went away because of nepotism. It kind of trickled down to the wrong pockets. And we looked at 3 different areas. We looked at the social effects, the economic effects, and the ecological effects of that kind of malgovernance. That started a whole crazy journey of now 4 years to trying to build solutions for that.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2019, we created CuraDAO, which was, I think, one of the first, if not the first, impact DAO in the world. It was a group of about 50 people, all locals from the island, governing a small treasury together, and they were allocating that to micro grants to, local NGOs, local individuals. From that experimentation, we realized that having a mechanism for distributing resources is incredible, but
Mm-hmm.
we still need to attract resources, which was still a problem.
Mm. Yeah.
It's
I just
around
want to
this. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just gonna say, like, I wanted to pause and just camp on that point for a second. A lot of people think that the biggest problem with supporting public goods is raising the money, but there's actually a whole nother side of that coin when it comes to distributing the funds in a legitimate way. And what you said about 50% of the funds going to nepotism or being misallocated is a huge problem. And I think that that's actually one of the big opportunities for the space is to build networks of collective intelligence that figure out how to route resources in a more legitimate way. So yeah, thanks for letting me just camp on that point. Please proceed.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that I was listening to the episode that you did about impact networks, and I think what you're describing as collective intelligence, a lot of the times the nepotism is not malintended. They're not trying to screw people over. Just by sheer lack of information and lack of understanding, they end up screwing people over. But it's majority of the times they're not trying to screw people over. It's just the system is designed in a way that they end up doing that. And I think that's really something incredible about the new way of organizing, a new way of coordination, where we're really getting more information from the edges of the network, from inside of the network, and we're able to make better decisions together, which I think that alone is already such a big problem and something so exciting about
Mm-hmm.
the space that we're in that we can even dream about finding solutions for that.
Yeah.
So that initial experiment was, I would say, extremely successful. We got support from all areas of the island, but then we realized that without resources, we can't really do much with our fancy tool. So that opened our research into community currencies, which is an innovation that already existed pre-crypto. It's essentially these local complementary currencies. They could be vouchers, they could be a Web2 system, an SMS system, whatever, that already exist in a couple hundred locations to increase local production and trade. So, for example, in Brixton, in Sardinia, you have these networks of hundreds of merchants that accept it and therefore give it legitimacy and um, kind of allow that area to thrive without needing outside input or needing less outside input. This was around the time as well when DeFi started to emerge slowly. I was always at the forefront building DAOs. I co-founded DAOfest with Felipe Duarte, which later became the Daoist. I've been really at the forefront of DAO innovation. And it's around early 2020 when it was very clear that everybody only cared about DeFi. I think it was DEFCON 2020. We were trying to make a case for DAOs, but everything that people cared about was Stani and Kane and kind of what they were up to. So this was kind of trivial, and it showed that, hey, this financial stack is going to come maybe even before the DAO stack comes. So we even tried shifting to DeFi fast. Luckily, we never did that. But what it did do was unleash kind of our tinkering around, hey, how can we leverage DeFi to potentially solve this resource problem that we have? So then we applied for a grant from MakerDAO, and we built together with MakerDAO what we called CuraDAI, which was a stablecoin for the island of Curacao. And that stablecoin was quite easy to make because Curacao, just like about 24 other countries, has a currency that's pegged to the US dollar, which means that our central bank needs to hold an X amount of US dollar in its reserve. And then because of that, we can hold a fixed exchange rate between our currency and the dollar. This used to be great in the times of oil refinery because we used to be one of the biggest oil refinery countries in the world. We're also number 2 most polluting country in the world per capita. I think we should be really proud of it. Not anymore though. Our refinery is closed now. But essentially, it was quite easy to make the system because we have this fixed peg. But while doing that, we also realized the downsides of this fixed peg. Because, and especially the past 2 years, every time that the US prints new money, our community is further diluted down because we don't get any of the benefits of this new cash, of this new capital, but we do get, let's say, the punishment of needing to maintain an extra reserve to keep our currency afloat. Combining that with the export or the export deficit that we have on the island. That has led to catastrophic outcomes. So, for example, during COVID, we had a 50% unemployment rate on the island because there
Oh,
literally
wow.
was no cash in circulation. We are heavily dependent on tourists, and those didn't come. And then essentially everything went to shambles. Over half of the population was relying on food aid. So this really pushed us further and further to go into this currency route. We did this experiment with MakerDAO. We proved that the models itself were relatively easy to make. Let's say the monetary tools, which was already incredible, right? Being able to create monetary tools like, here I
Yeah.
am, a little dude coming to your island, like, hey, I'm back home. By the way, I was born there, so I have some legitimacy on the ground.
Oh,
But
that's great. So you've got like the legitimacy in the Web3 community because you've been deeply integrated there and you were born
yes,
there, and you're kind of bridging that local community. I actually think that's a really scalable model for taking Web3 tools and creating like a
Mhm.
local regen toolkit. People who have legitimacy in both communities are going to be the bridge between doing those things. So how's it been
100%.
going?
Yeah, 100%. And I think we can dive into that in a bit later, kind of how we aim to scale this. But it's essentially this first pilot that shows so much. So Kurodai was, I would say, very successful. What we saw is that adding this cultural element to it, adding the colors and the feelings of a location, um, keeping it to the unit of account that they understand, increased the rate of adoption tremendously. So we ran an experiment, I think, for 3 to 6 months. We already had, I think, about 50 merchants, a couple hundred users, without having to do any marketing or anything in that relationship direction, because people understand what it is. They see their colors, they see their value, and they adopt it quite easily. Compared to previously, we would be issuing grants and ETH, and we would confuse the crap out of people because they would get a grant for 1,000 guilders, and then the moment that they went and claimed the grant, it was only 800 guilders, and they would get mad at us, like, "Hey, are you scamming me? You promised me 1,000, I get 800. What's going on?"
Yeah.
Um, and this was a pivoting moment, actually, as 2020, because as things got worse and worse and worse, we felt this urge to take ownership more and more. Pre-COVID, we were in more of like the Satoshi mindset. We were doing everything hidden and sneaky. Maybe it's hard to imagine for some people, but I would say pre-2020, you really shouldn't have spoken about crypto too often. It was a little bit
Hmm.
scary to talk about it. You were afraid that
Yeah.
you'd get robbed or sued or killed or
Yeah.
anything in that
Or
direction.
lose your deposits on FTX. We're recording during the week in which that's happening, so we might be regressing as an industry during this bear market. I don't know. We'll see.
Not your keys, not your coins. I'll repeat,
Yeah.
not your
Yeah.
keys, not your coins. Keep it close to you. That's the beauty of this technology. But essentially, what happened was we realized that this problem, and it isn't just Curacao, like I mentioned, there's more than 20 countries that have a similar system, and over 75 that have an anchor or a soft anchor to another currency. So this is a global problem that many countries are experiencing, especially developing countries. So we realized that we need to step up and take ownership of this problem. We participated in the Innovathon by the local government, and we, for the first time, imagined the system of Kolektivo, which means collective in the local language, where we created this, let's call it a circular economy, where the community creates value, tokenizes some of that value, and utilizes again to fund the next wave of development. Um, and we won. We won the Innovathon, and I was shocked. So
Hmm.
I asked the government people, "Do you understand what I'm saying? Because I'm saying very scary stuff." And they said, "We don't completely understand it, but we understand the problem and we want a solution just as bad as you do. So please, here's prize money." I think it was like 10. It was a very low amount. But they
Hmm.
wanted us to continue, and that gave me the confidence to go out, scale my team. I was already working with and for DAOs around that time to build up capacity, resources to turn Kolektivo into reality. And that kind of all accelerated in 2021. We received a grant from Fuse, and then later on a grant from CELO, which is a layer one blockchain focused on enabling prosperity. And they
Hmm.
gave us a grant for us to imagine the system. We came back with a white paper and prototype, and they told us, "Wow, this is incredible. This is exactly what we hoped to achieve with CELO. Let us know how we can help." That turned into a strategic grant, which we have been using for the past 12 months to get us to the stage where we are today. And that stage is that we just went live with our MVP 2 weeks ago. And in Q1, we will have the full system ready, which includes the toolkit for creating, managing local community currencies. a user-friendly wallet focused on real-world users and merchants, and a system to tokenize ecological assets, where we use a new standard that we developed called the geo-NFT, which we did together with Astral Protocol. So there's a whole bunch finally coming together, and then once we have established that, then it's on to scaling to 4 to 8 other jurisdictions and gather as much input as we can to hopefully turn this into a global, scalable solution that can go around the world.
Beautiful. Well, there's a lot there. There's two things that I really want to unpack. The mechanism nerd in me is really excited to talk about geo-NFTs and the mechanism behind that. And basically how governance verification, the geo-NFT and environmental monitoring, understanding the material reality works. So the mechanism nerd is sort of path A for me. But then the path B is taking these crypto tools and putting them in the hands of those who are not only non-crypto, but maybe are even non-tech native. And so, I don't know, choose your own adventure. Where should we dig in on first?
Let's start with the mechanism nerd side. I think that's exciting to start with.
Okay, let's do it. So how does the mechanism work? I feel like that's like a 5-word question that is going to unlock like 15 minutes of conversation. But yeah, at the mechanism at a very high level, how does it work?
So something that's very foundational to Kolektivo and our approach is this focus on local, this focus on making it as real and tangible as possible and embedding it into the real world. And one thing that has always frustrated us about traditional natural asset markets or carbon markets and is how opaque and abstract it is. It seems rather disconnected from reality more than it is connected to reality. So what we're trying to do is really embed this as close as possible into reality and make you feel, even through the web, that you understand the physical context of this. So what we have done is we've worked together with Astral Protocol. They have an amazing team, and they are specialists at spatial smart contracts. So those are smart contracts that are connected to a specific geographic area or geospatial area. And we're creating this standard called geo-NFT that is able to store data of a specific geographic location. So let's imagine a reef structure. We're first going to set out the parameters of this geographic location of the reef structure. Let's imagine it's 100 square meters. Now, we're going to deploy different methods to gather information or data from this reef structure. The methods we're combining right now are satellite data, IoT devices, on-the-ground input, and weather stations. And we combine those 4 kind of data streams into this geo-NFT, which then provides you with an almost live, up-to-date score of what we call the ecological index, or the well-being of this natural public good.
Yeah. Please
continue.
There's more.
There's more. So what this allows you to do is now you don't just have a store of this, but you have also a transferable store because it's an NFT. So what we do is based on the square meters of this position, we're going to issue an X amount of tokens. So let's imagine 100 square meters, you can issue 100 tokens out of this NFT. Now, what you can do with these tokens are different things. In our case, the majority of the tokens first go in the hands of those doing the interventions, which is, again, very different from traditional markets. If you are buying carbon credits, the people on the ground doing the work only get a tiny fraction of the value created. There's a trillion middlemen, there's governments, there's bureaucracy in the middle that takes the majority of the value away. It's more like a will game than a worker game. That makes sense. So what we're doing is first we're issuing these tokens to those that are actually taking the action. A small fraction goes to the Kolektivo network for market making purposes. But then what you can do with these tokens is we've created this impact map, which gives you a complete overview of all the geo-NFTs in existence.
Okay.
And you can purchase some of these geo-NFTs and stake them into a specific location. So the location that you own. And this will give you output rights for that specific location. So in addition to owning the data, you could potentially monetize the raw data. You also get your proportional share of output rights. And whether that's physical output rights, but even more important, it's digital output rights, such as potential carbon credits, potential biodiversity credits, or potential Web3 native methodologies. Let's imagine we have a data stream that's compliant with region networks methodology. Then we could also apply for those credits. So what we're trying to do is optimize for the easiest, scalable, but yet most efficient data collection methods that we can then use into these geo-NFTs. And this allows those NFTs, because of the kind of future claims that they have and the data stored inside of it, there is some market value that's going to get appointed to them, because you can almost get the speculator class that can look at a geo-NFT and say, hey, this is very likely to get carbon credits in 2 years because it complies with A, B, C, D, E. Or, hey, wow, this biodiversity is going from 20 animals in 3 minutes to 40 animals in 3 minutes. This is showing really good signs. I am willing to put my money on this specific area. So you're creating a speculator class, and then once those assets have value, these local communities can also decide to not sell them off, but to use them themselves and keep them and use them as collateral for their own reserve. And that's kind of the end game, or part of the end game.
So as I understand it, let me just say back to you what you said to me and tell me if I'm off or not. And hopefully the audience doesn't take this as gospel, because I'm going from 0 to 60 on this. It sounds like you're taking a geo-NFT, which basically is connected to some sort of environmental monitoring of the underlying material reality. And whether it's like biodiversity in a certain ecosystem, or the health of a coral reef, or some other material reality. And that NFT has more value if the material reality is more healthy biologically. And that creates a financial incentive for a capital class to collect the NFTs, regenerate the economy, and then they make a profit by doing that. So you're basically connecting the profit motive of people to the underlying material reality. Am I close?
You're very close. That's as good as it can get, basically. And I think on another episode you did a session on superstructures, and I think there it also came down a lot to values and embedding values that are regenerative by nature. And that's really what we're trying to do here. In theory, or at the start, you can use our toolkit with just US dollar backing. You can mint a community currency backed by US dollar or ETH or Bitcoin or whatever. But fundamentally, those assets are not as regenerative as ecological assets in your own community. So starting with what works today, but then slowly gravitating towards what we would like it to be, that's kind of the vision and kind of the way that we hope to scale this.
Right. And you know, of the live examples that in the pilot, what specific use case of material reality is being measured in the pilot, and where?
Yeah, so a lot of it is in the Caribbean, and we actually also had a group that went to Kenya for a time. The first and most real use case that we're starting with is agroforestry. It's a form of regenerative agriculture that is very real in especially the Caribbean and South America. And especially for these small islands, there's a big food deficit. On our island, for example, you can pay up to $4 for one apple because we don't have the supply chains for it. So there's a very real need on the ground for fresh fruits and vegetables. And then we combine it with the agroforestry methodology, because agroforestry doesn't just create good fruits and vegetables, it also increases the biodiversity, it provides better water management. It's essentially a way that it's regenerative by nature. It really allows you to plant one food forest, and it's going to make it easier to plant the next system. We're also working already now on reef methodologies, because we have a lot of reefs in our territory, especially in the Caribbean. And the third methodology is also already in its works, and that's mangroves. And mangroves is a real, you could call it power farmer. Like, this is like the yield farm that you would traditionally look for in DeFi, because a mangrove forest can sequestrate a lot of carbon, way more than you would expect. And in addition to that, they also provide a good shelter for growing fish and other species. So this is really a super asset that any country would like to have more of. It also protects you against storms and surges. So it's really, those are the three, let's call them asset types, that we are focused on in the coming year. But you would imagine, as this system starts scaling globally, that other localities may want to optimize for other types of assets. So maybe...
Have you found... go ahead.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, have you found... I mean, I guess you just launched the pilot, so maybe this isn't a fair question, but have you found that actually holding the NFT actually changes the actions of the speculator class such that they're investing in cleaning up these ecosystems in the material reality. And I guess I'm just wondering about, I know that all capital is sort of competing for yield in a financial sense. I'm sort of like a computer software engineer that's learning finance as I am in this space. But, like if there's easier, lower hanging fruit yield available elsewhere, then I know that sometimes capital will skip higher hanging fruit in terms of creating yield. And, I'm just wondering if that theory of if people have a financial incentive to clean up the material reality has actually borne out yet, and how you're sort of measuring and testing that.
So of course I'm tempted to say yes. I mean, I'm incentivized to say yes, but I truly believe it does. So for example, the island of Curacao, they were already investing for 4 years into this type of agriculture. Even the Minister of Economic Development was investing in it. And it's because of this reality that, at least for our locality, we cannot keep investing in traditional agriculture because one bad year and we're screwed. We need to look at more resilient alternatives. We need to lower risk. We need to focus more on regeneration because otherwise it may be our end. And I think that more and more people in the world is kind of impact investing. I mean, climate is a hot topic now. I think more and more people realize that there's a really big existential risk to profit optimization alone. And you can only make that bet a couple times because if you keep doing it, we're all screwed eventually. So I think we are seeing a change of game theory more than ever, where people are realizing things that are maybe not so important. Having the latest BMW, who the hell cares? That's maybe a funny story, but in the Caribbean, traditionally, people would take loans to get very expensive cars, but live in very small houses because it kind of rises your social status. You'd also have a very big TV, but a very small house with a broken roof. But essentially, what you're seeing now is that those same people, are now realizing that there are other values that are more valuable to them. Less stress, better food, more movement. So if you optimize for profit, like money, dollar profits alone, probably you're not going to be too interested in this because you can make more money investing in the gambling industry, for example, which is quite big in the Caribbean. But if you realize kind of, if you've come to some level of awareness, then you may be more incentivized to look at this.
So it seems like you're kind of targeting capital that maybe has a stake in that local community, not just a global pool of capital. Like no one from Wall Street's gonna swing in and start regenerating local communities on the ground, at least not yet. And it's more about targeting local capital. And maybe there's an angle there where, like you said, if they get more social capital from having a bigger car, maybe they get more social capital in their community also by regenerating their community.
100%. And that's actually how this whole thing started. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, I was still super young. And one day I was just shouting to my friends, like, it just needs to be easy to be good. Good needs to be cool. And I think we're slowly getting there. Being a regen is now cool. Where 2 years ago, being a degen, you were the OG. Now we're looking at the industry. And again, this week, we're showing that degenerative design or degenerative values are really fun in the early days. But over the long run, it's going to come back at you. And it's way cooler and more fun to be regen with your friends and really build a better future. But essentially, so I do think that we are looking for a certain type of capital, but also in addition to that, because of the power of DeFi, we're able to abstract this away to higher levels. So for example, we're already looking at solutions to pull different locations together into like an index. And then you can again make an index of that index, and you could potentially even still make an index of that index. So then at the very bottom, the assets that you're buying are food forests in Curacao, but what you're buying at the top is just an ecological index, and that may be of interest to you. So we're not going to sell you the locality. The locality is indeed primarily for locals that have more value or that get more value besides US dollar returns, kind of the different types of capital and what so. But by abstracting it further and further up, we can potentially reach this kind of global level as well.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's really amazing. I can't wait to see how the first experiment bears out, and then you can kind of start thinking about scaling this. And I think that one of the things that's really neat is that it just scales geographically. You've got a geo-NFT that has penetration in one locale, and then you do an adjacent locale, and you leverage the sort of momentum of the first one in order to sell into the second one. And it just feels like a very modular way of going web scale. And I guess, that leads me to my next question, which is, say in a world, say in 10 years, Kolektivo is maximally successful. What does that world look like, you think?
First, it's going to be very easy to be a regen. It's going to be economically and socially well accepted, to the point that, now you still have to sacrifice a lot to do impact stuff. You need to sacrifice a high salary, which comes with security. But if we're able to make these systems that reward you, again, maybe not in US dollar terms, but in all the other forms of value that exist, as good or better, then it's going to be quite an easy choice. But really focusing on the individual, making it as easy as possible for the individual to make the right choices. And then as a result of that, more people will be making right choices. And this kind of continues and trickles down into this network of first geographic and then a global network. And what I hope that this global network would do is essentially aggregate all of this into this Kolektivo network token or this Kolektivo network, where essentially this currency is an abstraction of the development of hundreds of different localities and the regeneration of Earth. And that value then becomes, let's say, the value of the network, which is comparable to maybe proof of work or proof of stake in Ethereum. Kind of, what do we optimize for? We optimize, the one is kind of for machines like miners, which I think is a really bad use case. We already know that that's not the best way to do security and kind of value creation. Then with ETH, and congratulations, ETH, on finally being deflationary. I think that on itself is already incredible, but it's still based on some digital usage and some digital development, which is still to some extent abstracted away from reality. Where the system that I would like to see, that I hope to imagine, is baked into the development of humans and nature alike, and really becomes this big impact network.
The world has woken up to refi, and CELO is here for it. CELO is the layer one for the regenerative finance movement. It's fast, planet positive, and built for the real world. CELO has committed to producing a sustainable future from day one and has built its technology around one of the lowest carbon impact consensus mechanisms, and is the world's first carbon negative EVM compatible layer one blockchain. CELO is a movement to create the conditions of prosperity for everyone, whether it's tokenizing carbon credits with Toucan, providing capital to underserved communities with Unicorn, or building for millions of users around the globe. CELO was created to transform crypto enthusiasts into a movement of changemakers. Follow along on Twitter @CELO.org to learn more about how CELO is accelerating refi for a positive, lasting impact on people, communities, and the planet. And if you're a builder interested in refi, be sure to join the Build with CELO hackathon live now with a prize pool of over $100,000. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Masari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
It's interesting to hear you say that, like, it would be economically incented to be good. It's good to be good. It's cool to be good. The sort of maximal successful question that we would always answer, or at least I would always answer when I was at Gitcoin, was we want to create a world where everyone has a rational economic incentive to work on the commons in their local community. And so basically what you're doing is creating an economic incentive that is the inverse of the tragedy of the commons. It is the crypto economic incentive to maintain the commons. And I heard, so it felt like a reflection of what you were saying in your answer sounded like it translates well to my answer. And I guess, what I'm asking, what the question that I'm sort of circling right here is, at what level do you think pluralism has to play in this stack? Like, in my vision of a civilizational scale regen crypto economic infrastructure, Optimism stacks on top of Giveth, stacks on top of Gitcoin grants, stacks on top of Kolektivo, and you've got a pluralistic economic incentive to support the commons. And that pluralism is important because you have different mechanisms, and if one fails, if one goes the way of FTX, then you have others that you can implicitly rely on. So not just having one structure, like the government is a giant monolith that we depend on, and if your government is bad, then it's bad. But if you have a pluralistic civilizational scale infrastructure for supporting the commons, then there's anti-fragility in that. So I was kind of wondering, are our two theses about these economic incentives compatible, and if so, do they stack to be more than the sum of their parts?
I think they're compatible for sure. So a lot of my insights actually come from regenerative agriculture in the moment I started to understand how nature deals with these things. And I think I once wanted to write, so I also did a lot of work with Prime DAO and kind of DAO to DAO coordination. And my thesis was always that by turning this into a network of networks, we become more resilient, we become more anti-fragile, and we can do better. I think we actually had a token swap with Gitcoin as well. So I think our thesis kind of the organizations also shows that we share that. But I think, again, bringing it down, this resiliency is so critical. And the open source nature of Web3 makes it so easy, and the composability. Already right now, are we integrated with different solutions on chain? But I do think that the part that is also important is the trade-offs between giving people too many options, which I often experience in Web3 myself. Kind of there's 7 or 8 or 10 different lending protocols, and for most people, they're not sure what to pick. So I do think that, yes, this modularity and this kind of pluralism is extremely important, but we also need to make sure that we tailor the right packages, let's say, to individuals, where I found more success and adoption with an app that has 2 dApps integrated in it than 500. So when I give my mom, for example, a MetaMask wallet and she can do everything in the world, she does nothing because she doesn't know where to start. She doesn't know what to do. But when we give her the Kolektivo wallet, where she can only store it, spend it, send it, or purchase mobile credit or swap it on Balancer, then it becomes very easy because she understands those 5 things. She understands how they connect to each other. So I do think that that's something that we can still get better at as an industry, is really packaging those things nicely and making it easy for average people to use it. Because even I, as like a hardcore DeFi person, I'm still cautious and I still don't use everything. And and especially maybe another point there is, as you compound more things together, you also compound risk and compound friction. So yeah, I think that bringing those things down and really packaging things nicely is part of the UX development that we need for this to become a billion people kind of tool.
Well, we've come full circle back to the question that I was going to ask you, which is, how do we put these tools in the hands of not only non-crypto people, but non-technologists, and have them actually use them? So, you mentioned not giving an overabundance of choice. Modularity might be the right choice for the architecture of this thing to make it scale, but maybe creating a more compact user experience where people can do one thing and do it well. But what else is there for bringing this stuff mainstream? Like, for example, when you deploy these wallets to people, are you teaching them about private key management? How do you get around that problem? There's a bunch of other problems with Web3. I'd be curious how you're approaching those.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many answers there, and I've experienced with people from 8 to 80 over the past year. So there's such a diverse set of users, and everybody needs their own kind of touch. So as a starting point, I would say people that the less pre-programmed you are, the easier it is to onboard. So young people, easy. They don't care about banks. They don't care about anything. You show them an app that can do things, and they do the things. They don't care that much. So that one is rather easy. I think it's just marketing it to them. They'll adopt it if they like it. If not, they don't do it. That's good. I think the parts that I am most or more excited about is commercial individuals. So let's say small business owners. Onboarding them has also been relatively easy because traditionally the financial infrastructure in these places isn't great. They're not used to things like Cash App or like instant transfer or cross-border transfer or anything in that direction that we Westerners are spoiled with, I would say. So giving them the utility. So depending on their desires, but for the merchant, it's really utility. This is going to give you more clients. You're going to pay less fees. It's going to be faster. Your business is going to run better. They're not going to argue with you. That's all they want. They don't care about the tech. They don't care about Most of them don't even care about law. They'll literally say, "Oh yeah, no, just do it. They'll come after me if they don't like it." But the thing that they really need is utility. Now you have another class that's, let's say, the culturally, let's call them the woke class, the people that are already aware that the climate needs help, that we need to shift our priorities. um, to them, it's a more of a vision sell. Like, you need to explain to them why this app that they don't care about is going to help them accomplish this vision of a um, more regenerative or better stewarded world. And that's a bit more education. So it's really starting with, this is not Bitcoin. We're not using electricity. That already takes half an hour, because a lot of them are pre-programmed to say, oh no, crypto is bad. I actually went to an impact conference, I think it was 9 months ago, in the Netherlands. It's called Nederland for Impact. It was like all the young impact people in the Netherlands. And I asked the question, who thinks that crypto does more harm than it does good? And I kid you not, 95% of the people raised their hand. They all thought that this was a scam, that this was bad for nature. And I went into arguments with them that, hey, these traditional financial and coordination structures take way more energy and use way more value and destroy way more things than, even if you compare it to Bitcoin. All the banks in the world, with all the government, like they use so much more for coordination and for keeping the systems running. Um, so yeah, I think with them it's more education, and then for the average Joe, it's just making sure that the app is useful to them. A lot of them. So, for example, at the festival that we had 2 weeks ago, we had about 300 people use the wallet. Only 10 of those were skeptical. The other 290 literally were like, "Oh, I can use this to buy drinks? Epic! I'm out. Let me go get some drinks." Because they generally don't even want to ask the harder questions. They don't care that much. They just want utility. When it becomes harder and they need to onboard, they need to do this. Yeah, then you may need to explain better. Oh, who's storing your money? And but generally, they don't care that much. Maybe finally, you spoke about private keys, and that's, I think, one of those examples where it has gone wrong in the past. Again, I've onboarded hundreds of people. Um, there are two ways to do it. Either I make it really fun and secretive, and I'm like, hey, you really need to write this down. It's super important, but you can share it with your best friend, half of it, and the other two have to. I'm kind of turning it into something that they feel is almost a little bit naughty, like, oh, I'm keeping this for myself. Or on the other side, making it super easy. So we're working on a solution to do private key abstraction where you can do social recovery and what so. But it is critical to either go all in and explain to them that this is kind of extremely important and they should care of it, because otherwise you end up holding your crypto in an exchange, and we don't want that. Um, or making it so simple that they don't even have to understand what the hell a private key is, and that they generally just understand, oh, this is my money, only I control it, and if I need help, I cannot go to the bank, I need to go to my friends. Which is maybe the another thing that, to me as a 25-year-old, was very confusing, that people actually had bankers that they used to talk to. I've never thought of that idea, that if something happens with my money, that I would call someone and that specific person would help me. But that's something that we're actually having to navigate a lot in the Caribbean, because people still have to go physically to the bank. So then they would ask me like, oh, if this goes wrong, who do I call? I'm like, no, you can't really call anybody. You can maybe message us and we can try to look into it. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to approach that. But again, I think just having local context makes all these things so much easier, because you speak the language, you understand the struggles, you know their backgrounds, and you can much easier kind of shift them towards a
Right.
specific direction.
Well, I just feel so lucky because with Gitcoin, we just fell ass backwards into an audience that already understood the utility of crypto, private key management, installed MetaMask, could understand transactions. We were serving software engineers. And, I really just think that, like I said, Gitcoin fell ass backwards into that audience. And it's one of the reasons why it's been able to deliver $72 million worth of funding for public goods, blah, blah, blah. When it comes to taking that kind of momentum and bringing it to a novel community, it feels like there's drivers and there's barriers. The drivers are the reasons why they need a solution for some problem that they have, and the barriers are like learning how to do private key management and transaction broadcasting and all that kind of stuff. and I feel like a lot of people in this space focus too much on lowering the barriers and not enough on creating new drivers to get people over the barriers. And one of the things I see with you is that there's just such a driver for having a more community, or regenerating local communities with Kolektivo, that people probably natively feel that driver. But there's an open question in my mind about is the systems that we're going to build for the mainstream, are people going to learn the new primitives of Web3? Like in Web 1, we all learned about the home button and the back button and the secure lock that shows me that I'm using HTTPS. Or is it going to be more like the blockchain mullet, where it's like blockchain in the back and it's Web 2 in the front? And it seems like it feels more likely that the blockchain mullet is going to happen to me, where it feels like a Web 2 app or like a native app in the front, but all of that blockchain stuff is kind of hidden in the back. And that's scary to me because the two paradigms don't exactly fit. Like once you broadcast something to a blockchain, it's out there forever. There is no like customer service to contact if you lose your money. And so, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add here, but this is kind of my traversal of trying to bring this technology to people who aren't just software engineers.
I do have a lot of thoughts there. I think generally we're going to see some core principles of blockchain to be widely adopted and normalized. Think of transparency. I think that's something that is being more and more normalized in these communities and was traditionally not normalized at all. Ownership, truly being the owner of something, is extremely powerful, but also new to people. That's a concept that they will need to learn and get comfortable with. I think digital assets are currently already being normalized more and more. People understand that they can freely send things and receive things, and I think NFTs actually did something really good there. There's digital governance. I think more direct governance is also something that I hope people get more of. But I think besides those, let's say, key powers that they're gaining, I don't want to bother them too much with the technicalities. They should understand what it means to them and what it allows them to do. But they're probably not all going to become as technical or being even want to become as technical as we are as this rolls out.
Got it. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important to figure out how to put these tools in more hands. So I think that the work you're doing here is pioneering. I think we only have 5 minutes left, and so I'm wondering if there's anything that I didn't ask that you want to tell us about with respect to Kolektivo.
I think we covered most of it, actually. I think we went through the geo-NFT stuff, we went through the community currency stuff, why that's important. We went through this kind of global vision of maybe it's worth kind of highlighting that one more time, kind of in the current community currency systems that are Web 2, they don't have digital assets, they don't have DeFi tools, so there's no connection between, let's say, Brixton and Sardinia. There's also no ability for them to coordinate cross deployment, let's say, because they don't have the same standards, they don't have the same methods. By standardizing some aspects of this, but still allowing for local customization, what we're creating is this global network that will not only build better software together, but can also have digital asset pairings together. So two things are super cool there. I think one is we can make markets between, let's say, Kolektivo Brazil and Kolektivo Curacao through the Kolektivo network token. So you can go from Curacao to KNT and then from KNT to Brazil. And this makes it a global system where you can actually do good in Curacao and then pay for something in Colombia or Brazil. And that's something that we've never seen before in the context of community currencies. They're always hyper local, but not scalable to the rest of the world. And that's something that now with DEXs and with, I spent some time myself at Balancer and kind of really getting deep into what you can do with these liquidity pools. And I think that's truly incredible. And then I guess the other part of that is, like I said, this bigger vision of Kolektivo as a global asset and how that will play out. I think that's also really interesting. I really hope that 10 years from now, we'll see different types of structures at the top of CoinGecko, which aren't just stable coins at layer ones. I really hope that we get to the point where the application itself is so valuable that that it can get to the top and it's valued as an application instead of kind of forcing everyone to build the base infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I would have more
Yeah.
if I can. Because
Yeah, I mean, we got a few more minutes. I mean, the thing I just want to remark on is that I'm increasingly, I believe in local currencies, and the reason for that is that with U.S. dollars and bitcoins, everything gets its most commoditized form. Bud Light and like bikinis are like the race to the bottom of the brainstem that happens in like global ad markets, for example. And what if we could create local currencies around values that are like this biodiversity of and health of our coral reefs, or the fish trade in a local area? Or they don't even have to be local geographically, but they could be local in value systems. Like maybe Gitcoin's, a community built around global public goods, and Radical is built around open source software. And so I actually think that like at first, like, when Bitcoiners call every coin that's not Bitcoin a shitcoin, I always knew that was wrong because Bitcoin's kind of the first shitcoin. But I actually think that it's like 180 degrees wrong, because what we want is a diversity of local currencies that represent their own value systems that are interoperable and can be traded to US dollars if you want to move into the global system. So a plurality of those local currencies I see as being a key building block here.
100%. And I think that's freedom, right? The opportunity to choose what you align with and which values you want to represent. And that brings me all the way back to this initial problem that there are over 80 countries that, in order to survive, need to be packed to a bigger value system that doesn't share that same symbiotic relationship with them. So it's kind of a one-sided relationship where every time I do a transaction in Curacao, I'm indirectly reinforcing the US hegemony, because indirectly I'm reinforcing the US dollar banking system, the US dollar as a currency, even though maybe I don't want to. Maybe I have different values, but I can't decide. I don't have another option. So this plurality of value alignments, I think that cryptocurrencies have enabled. I think it's potentially even the biggest innovation out of all, because now you can finally decide what you really care about and spend your energy and resources there, and gain more of that. I think that's incredible, and why I really hope that after this crazy period, we'll see DAOs thrive again, and we can build these systems to be interconnected and resilient.
Beautiful. Well, it seems like we covered one little lens on the global pluralistic world that we can create that supports impact DAOs and public goods and tragedy of the commons. Where can people find Kolektivo online, and how can they get involved?
So first to start, we don't have a Discord. It's on purpose. We do not have a Discord, but we do have a Twitter. So you can find me at LuukDAO. You can find the project at Kolektivo with a Kolkiti. Kolektivo with a lot of Ks, no Cs, in case you want to try. We also have a website, kolektivo.network. Here you can write our blue paper. You can find our deck. We're doing a seed round currently to fund the next iteration of this framework. What else? We have a bunch of mini documentaries out already now about agroforestry, reef structures. So if you're interested, that went live a couple days ago on YouTube, also Kolektivo. So that's, I think, the best places to find us.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for coming on the pod. Can't wait to see how the pilot turns out, and hopefully we can have you back in a year or two, and hopefully y'all are scaling at that point. So thanks so much, Luuk.
Epic. We'll make it happen, Kevin. Thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a good day.
Yeah. Peace.
Ciao.